Welcome everyone that's getting online. We're really excited to have this discussion today, and we're especially honored and privileged to have Superintendent Joan Ebert take time out of her busy day to be with us, and Superintendent Jara, who will be joining us just a little bit later. He had another event or another meeting, and so he's going to be jumping on a little later in the conversation. And want to also thank all of you for taking time out of your day to join us today. My name is Yvette Williams, and I'm chair of the we are going to, Greta, Dr. PA is going to give us some housekeeping and opening us up with some remarks. But I wanted to acknowledge Shawina Timms on the helping us out today. She's going to be monitoring the chat and helping us with being able to ask questions and get answers in a more organized way. So we'll take directions from Shawina, and she will advise when we are going to be taking questions. The idea is, as we move through each of the sections in the agenda, then we will open up for question and answers before we move to the next speaker. That's the plan. I'd also like to thank as well, you're going to hear from a couple of people. We'll introduce them then when they come on. But I also wanted to give a shout out to our data analyst, who is Alice Esquivel. She's a graduate of Las Vegas, of Advanced Technology in 2013 and graduated from Syracuse with a master's in business analytics in 2018. She is currently working on her day job, so she's not able to join us today, but I did want to give her a shout out for the excellent work she's been doing in helping us analyze the data. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Greta. And I guess there's a way I can probably mute everybody, isn't it? You know, I apologize.
We can unmute ourselves when we're ready to speak. That might be.
Yeah. So let me see. You know what? I'm not going to mess with this thing, Greta. I'm not an expert on this. I'm an advocate. So forgive me, you all. Okay, Greta, we'll turn it over to you. This is Dr. Greta PA, and we're so honored to have her part of our organization. She's a lifetime member of the Clark County Black Caucus. She's a former administrator, cabinet member, teacher from Clark County School District, comes with a wealth of information and knowledge and expertise, and so honored and privileged to have her working with us in the caucus around education equity. So I'll turn that over to you. Dr. PA? Dr. PA?
Is she here?
I see her. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. Good morning, everyone. How are you? Just kind of wave. And just a quick reminder, please, when you leave yourselves on mute, and Sharina Timms will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any comments, specific questions, please put those in the chat. And when we get to that portion of today's critical conversation, we will definitely honor and try to get to as many questions and comments as possible. What a great time to have a critical conversation around structural racism and the impact that it has had on education. And today's focus is going to be particularly around African American Black students, looking at some of the historical patterns that have occurred in the field of education regarding our African American Black students. And we do have data. Data will be the frame of reference and the focus point to have this critical conversation today. Just most recently, our governor, Sisolak, did proclaim.
Oh, it says connecting.
Most recently, Governor Sisolak did write a proclamation. And what was so interesting about this proclamation just want to put it on the screen, give you a few minutes to skim through it. He declared racism as a public health crisis. I think we should give Governor Sisolak a round of applause, because that is really making a bold statement. And in addition to proclaiming racism as a public health crisis, he also said, based on research, that he and his administrative team are planning to take proactive action so that we can reduce and minimize racism, particularly the impact on public health and education. So throughout the field of education, we know that it is important. Those of us who are educators and in the educational system, we do have an important role and a responsibility in addressing and eliminating racism, especially when it comes to our students and families. For today's focus, remember, we know all students matter, and we are concerned about every student. The focus of the caucus today is to really focus on using data as the point of reference for African American Black students. Quote by Terry Watson from Educational Week Teacher. Just want to give you a few minutes to reflect so that you can be thinking mentally as Ms. Williams guides us through the data, and we engage in conversation with Superintendent Joan Ebert, our state superintendent of education, and Dr. Jesus Hara, the superintendent of schools for Clark County. Just think about that as your frame of reference mentally, and challenge yourself. Do you think that this statement is true? And I want to remind everyone again to please mute yourself, because on my end, it seems like I'm hearing a lot of backdraft, and I just want to make sure it isn't me. And Ms. Williams, are you able to mute? Well, if you do, you'll mute me, won't you?
No, I'm going through and I'm
Okay,
muting
perfect.
it. Looks like we've got quite a number of people that are not muted.
And I'm glad to see that we do have someone from the Public Ed Foundation, our district's Equity and Diversity Department. I see several principals there. This is going to be an excellent conversation, but I do want us to focus on this. Schools are crucial in combating racism. We have that power as educators and educators, administrators, and executive leaders in school districts, because we provide children with mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And this was a quote way back in 1990. And here we are in 2020, still having to remind ourselves of the power that we have as educators and educational institutions. So most recently, from the White House, there was a memo that went out to all federal workers and federal departments declaring that there would be no more approval for federal funds to be used regarding critical race theory training. And that's inclusive of training around diversity, equity, inclusivity, privilege, any kind of training that's under the umbrella of diversity, racism, and cultural diversity. So when you look at that attack on CRT or critical race theory, and many people are called, and it was viewed as being anti-American when you participate or offer training under that umbrella of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I want you to just complete this sentence to yourself mentally. We have that attack on critical race theory. It's being labeled now as anti-American propaganda. And just fill it in mentally yourself.
That is such bullshit.
And on that note, what we would do is save these last two questions for the end, because these are questions that we want to generate to frame our conversations around after Ms. Williams shares the data and we engage in that conversation with State Superintendent Joan Ebert and Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Jesus Hara. And just one quick reminder, please, please leave your mics on mute. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, put them in the chat box. Sharina will guide us through that to let us know if there's something particular or specific that we need to pay attention to. And just want to say to everyone, you all look beautiful. Thank you for taking time out of your beautiful schedule. And Ms. Williams, we do have a couple of trustees that have joined the call as well. And I see our good friend, Marilyn Loop. I just got to give a shout out. Just so good to see everyone. So on that note, let me turn it back over to our awesome chair of the Clark County Black Caucus, Ms. Yvette Williams.
Thank you, Dr. PA. And I noticed also we have Senator Pickard as well. I've also noticed our trustee Lola Brooks is on the call. I see several of our state representatives as well. Mark Newbern and Felicia Ortez is on here. And so we're really excited that you all found some time today. And I might be missing a few people. I was just kind of thumbing through and trying to mute folks and ran across some of you. So anyway, if I left somebody out or if someone has joined us since, my apologies. I also see Jack Martin on the line, which is a very important stakeholder in our work around juvenile justice reform. So thank you for that. I see a number of our great principals out in here and many of our thought partners at UNLV. I see Joseph Morgan and some others. So I'm really excited. I see some of our administrators. We see Carmen Miller's on the line, and and so I'm just really excited. Ken Evans is on the line as well from our urban chamber.
And Miss Williams, Tam Leonard, we can't forget our Tam from Spring Valley. That's our neighborhood.
Yes, that's right. Tam's on the line. That's my neighborhood. So anyway, a shout out to all of you and thank you so much for being here. A lot of folks from NDE and CCSD are educators, and we also have a few of our media partners as well. I want to just give a shout out to Michael Lyle because he's with The Current, and I will say that he's one of the few African-American journalists in this city, and so it's always great to have him engaged and involved, and I always enjoy reading his articles. So I'm going to open up by giving you the presentation that we gave at the Interim Legislative Education Committee last month, and I'm going to give you that presentation. I hope that Dr. PA, I did give you those slides in the order that I would speak to them, so I'll just, if you're able to do that. And you're on mute, so I couldn't hear you. Hopefully we can give you these slides, but we have the numbers. If not, we are going to put the presentation on our website, so you can just go to our website and download that. That'll be up today. So if you want to come to our website tomorrow, it's www.cc, like Clark County, CC Black Caucus. So that's CC BlackCaucus.com. And if you go there, I'll put a little easy link up there so that you don't have to try to find it in our massive website. I'll put a little link there, a little button that'll say presentation. And then you can just click on that and that'll take you directly to the presentation. That will, you can download it or print it out. And then we'll also add the graphics for you as well, so that you can use those graphics as you inform others about the information that you learned today. So the development of the Nevada Academic Achievement Goals was a thoughtful and inclusive process that incorporates Nevada's vision for being the fastest improving state in the nation. NDE began the goal setting process with a review of historical student performance, baseline data, and literature review of goal setting practices around the country. This was a painful process, but one that was necessary if Nevada wanted to provide education, equity, and justice to every student. As a result, Nevada launched the most progressive education reforms in Nevada history, with Nevada's plan for the federally mandated Every Student Succeeds Act. The Nevada ESSA plan directly attacks gaps in education access and opportunity and provides a roadmap to lift those students up with the greatest needs. And if you want to get a copy of the ESSA plan, you can find that at the Nevada Department of Ed's website. It is on there and easy to find. And that will give you a little bit more information about our particular plan. But the focus on ESSA by the federal government is on reducing proficiency gaps. And we're going to ask again for those who have joined us to please mute your mic. I think that's Michael joining us. Yeah, Michael, can you mute your mic for us, please? Otherwise, you're going to come up. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. So equity and accessing literacy in 2017, the Nevada legislature adopted NRS 178. That provides least proficient students with equitable access to literacy. It is the only statute in Nevada that deals directly with least proficient students. The legislature identified least proficient students as being in the lowest 25 percentile. So we're not talking about all students who are least proficient. We're talking about students who are in the lowest 25 percentile. The funds included 208 schools in CCSD. Recent federal court rulings protects Black students' constitutional rights to literacy. As a result of several lawsuits that have been heard and decided upon just this current year, ESSA mandates that least proficient students groups must be given a priority in every state education plan. The new Nevada Education Funding Plan, which we refer to as SB 178, is Nevada's first weighted funding plan where dollars actually follow the student based on their need and directly aligns to our ESSA state plan. Greta, can you bring up that first slide? Thank you. The specific student groups must be included in any new weighted funding formula. This is what the caucus is advocating for, because we have found and have seen that the improvements that are being done in the state of Nevada are from the bottom up. So that means that we are actually reducing the proficiency gap. So here are some numbers for you to consider. When we look at the way that we break down our conversation today, there's three major programs that the Nevada legislature are currently funding. It's SB 178, which is our lowest 25 percentile, and then we have our Victory and our Zoom program as well. So I want to give you this slide that you're looking at right now, which basically gives an overall view of the student population broken down by race. In SB 178, when we get to this, you're going to see we're serving a lot more students. So when you look at this percentage, keep in mind that it's not a clear reflection or overall analysis of how many students we're serving, because we're just looking at percentages. So percentages are going to, just reflect that and not really how many students we're serving. So in SB 178, we're serving 2.9% Asian students. Our Black students was 18.8, Caucasian 13.4, Hispanic 57.78, American Indian, Alaskan Native 0.9, two or more races 4.7, Native Hawaiian Pacific 1.6, because I know this data is a little small for you to read, so that's why I'm going through it for you. Victory School, we have 1.8% Asian, 20.2 Black, 7.7 Caucasian, 63.7 Hispanic, 2.4 American, Alaskan, two or more races 3.4, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander 0.9. And in Zoom, we have 1.9% Black, 13%, Caucasian 9.8, Hispanic 70.35%, American Indian, Alaskan Native 0.5%, two or more races 3.5, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander 1.2%. SB 178 served twice the number of students receiving free and reduced lunch than in Zoom and Victory schools combined. And Greta, you can bring up that next slide if you want. That's that graph, that second graph. SB 178 served more than double the number of Black students in Victory and Zoom schools combined. Although it was the intention when Victory School was established to serve a large number of Black students on free and reduced lunch in our most economically challenged neighborhoods, that has changed since 2015. SB 178 served 4 times the number of Black students served in our Victory schools. And I think that's an important data point for us to think about and talk about or consider when we're discussing policy decisions. The notion that Victory Schools serves an overwhelming number of Black students who are economically challenged, that's just not the case. So we want to make sure that we're dispelling that misnomer that Victory Schools represents a large number of Black students that are high risk. The numbers don't show that. SB 178 serves approximately 44% more Hispanic students than Zoom schools. And in 2019-20, CCSD schools, in addition to a wider geographic area and serving students in most every legislative district. So in SB 178, the difference between the Zoom and Victory schools, which tend to serve certain geographic locations, with SB 178, we're able to serve students in all geographic locations and serve more students. Some of the items that I wanted you to consider or data to consider when you're looking at this particular graph is the subgroup of students we're serving. So with our SB 178, these are numbers for Clark County School District. This is not a state data point. This is a Clark County School District for school year 2019-20. This is only for what we call our special programs, which are those 3 programs. When we look at our free and reduced lunch students, and we are serving in Victory 16,533 students. Free and reduced lunch kids in Zoom was 27,780. And when we look at SB 178 for free and reduced lunch, we served 86,845 students on free and reduced lunch. When we look at our ELL students, we had 5,011 in Victory, 9,858 in Zoom, and 19,389 in SB 178. Again, I just want to note that when we look at our ELL student population being served geographically, in SB 178, you're addressing ELL needs of various student languages, unlike what we are in Victory in Zoom. So in SB 178, we're actually serving more students who are ELL and with various languages, including various languages. When we look at race and we look at our Black and Brown students, and we're focusing on our Black students today, but I just wanted to share our Hispanic students as well. When we look at our, Hispanic students between these 3 special programs, we're serving 10,684 Hispanic students in Victory. We served 19,677 Hispanic students in Zoom last school year. And with SB 178, we served 53,249 students, Hispanic students last school year. When we look at our Black student population, however, this is where the numbers start to get very concerning for us from an equity and an education justice lens. When we look at the number of Black students being served last school year in Victory, there was only 3,856 Black students enrolled in Victory schools. So I want to pause for a moment and just give you that number again. 3,856 Black students were served in Victory School in 2019-2020. And in Zoom, we had 4,595 Black students receiving services. So again, 4,595 Black students in Zoom. When we look at the number of Black students enrolled in SB 178 or receive SB 178 funds, it was 16,834 Black students we were serving. And I just want to remind you that during this past special session, the legislature and the governor's budget recommended cutting SB 178 and keeping Zoom and Victory. So for us, this was not the most equitable way to divide the funds. For us, it disenfranchised 16,835 Black kids from getting the services that they were receiving. And I want to just note here that in the state of Nevada, historically, Black students have the widest gap in proficiency rates in the state. Last time we looked at the data, and I'm hoping that Joan can help me out a little later, our Superintendent Ebert, I shouldn't say Joan, Superintendent Ebert will share with us maybe or update us on that number. But last when we looked, the number was 78% of Black students in the state of Nevada were not proficient. So 78%. And it is the highest percentage by race of any group of students. So we're particularly concerned when we see 16,834 students losing the resources that they needed. Again, looking at the numbers, 53,000 Hispanic students, 16,834 Black students on SB 178. I didn't do the math, but you can do the math on that. So overwhelmingly, more students are served through SB 178, providing a more equitable funding formula for students with the greatest needs. Again, SB 178 serves all students who fall in the lowest 25% proficiency rate, and that is not based on race, geographic, or school location, neighborhood. They all are free and reduced lunch or ELL. They have to be one or the other. And they serve students in a wider geographic area. Some of our schools lost a tremendous amount of money when they lost SB 178. One of our high schools in particular, we lost $1 million for one school year. That's how many students they have in their high school that are least proficient receiving SB 178 funds. So that was a big hit for them. So the analysis shows that out of the 20,054 students enrolled in Victory schools, I already went over that, so I'm going to skip that. Greta, can you put up the next slide for me? That's the pie chart. Thank you. So when we look at the pie chart, and I'm just going to go over this for you again because the numbers are a little small. When we look at our first pie chart there, and this is again for just Clark County School District for 2019-20, you'll see that when we look at our specialized group for free and reduced lunch, if we combine all three special programs, Victory, Zoom, and SB 178, you will see that 13% of that total student population were Victory students, 21% were Zoom, and 66% were SB 178. Our ELL student population, 15% are in Victory, 29% in Zoom, and 56% were in SB 178. When we break that down by African American Hispanic students, 15% of the Black students enrolled in one of these special programs is in a Victory school, 18% in Zoom, and 67% was in SB 178. When we look at our Hispanic student population, 13% enrolled in Victory, 23% enrolled in Zoom, and 64% of all of the Hispanic students being served in one of these three special programs was Hispanic. So a return on investment and funding equity is an important consideration that we're really considering as well when deciding education policy. Funding equity is a focus area for the U.S. Department of Ed currently and have issued Dear Colleague letters in this regard, informing how the Department of Civil Rights may rule in that regard. And Greta, can you bring up that next slide for me? Thank you. In 2018-2019 school year, ELL students received $3,249 per student designated as Zoom, $1,155 designated as Victory, and $1,200 designated as SB 178. In the 2019-20 school year, there were some additional funds allocated. ELL students received $35.44 per student designated as Zoom, $1,247 designated as Victory, and $1,200 designated as SB 178, and that is per child. Concerning all the data in this presentation, CCBC, or Clark County Black Caucus, is of the opinion that the funding formula is not equitable. And when we look at the difference in the funding as well, I just want to point out for those who may not be aware that Zoom and Victory is a school-based funding, so the school actually gets that funding and it's used overall for the entire school. When we look at our SB 178 dollars, that funding goes directly to the child. So the dollars follow the child. Wherever the child is enrolled, that's where the dollars will go. I will make a note here, though, that when in working with CCSD on some of this information and just keeping an eye on what's going on with funding and resources, they actually were able to serve more students than what was allocated. So for example, and you'll see this reflected in the difference in the numbers between NDE's reports and CCSD reports. So if you're analyzing that data, make sure you keep that in mind, that even though NDE is basing it on $1,200 per student, and then they multiply it by the number of students that were served. Well, actually, I should say the amount of dollars that was allocated, and they divided by $1,200, and then that's how many students were served. But we actually saw CCSD was able to serve many more students with utilizing those resources at that particular school. So that's why you might see the numbers vary somewhat. I want to give you a breakdown on proficiency rates, or who are the kids in Zoom and Victory and SB 178 as it relates to our least proficient students. So when we look at our Zoom, and this information I'm giving you now is a state data point. When we look at our Zoom students, the number of students in Zoom that actually fall in the lowest 25 percentile, because SB 178, remember, only serves students who are least proficient. So that's our lowest 25%. That means they're 0 to 25% proficient. And so we thought it's important in this conversation to understand what the student population is with the greatest needs in each of these special programs. And so for the least proficient students in Zoom, we had a total last year, this is a school year 2019-20, and I apologize, I don't have that graph for you. It was 8,845 students. I'm sorry, 8,846 students. I don't want to leave that one student out. And when we look at Victory School, let me go back to Zoom. So it was 8,846 students out of 40,682 students enrolled. Victory, we have 20,054 students last school year, and there were 5,194 students who fell in the least proficiency rate. When we look at SB 178, we had 58,283 students, and actually they served more than that. Remember what I said a few minutes ago concerning who was served. And actually 100% of those students, or the 58,281 students, are least proficient. So because the money does go directly to only students who fall in the least proficiency rate. So again, if our intent is to assist students who are least proficient, SB 178 was able to serve that particular targeted student group 100%, whereas with Zoom and Victory, we see a much smaller percentage. When we look at Enrollment again by state, I want to give you that number only because I gave you the numbers for Clark County School District, so I want to make sure I give you the number for the state. So when we look at Zoom, the number of Black students enrolled throughout the state in Zoom was 5,303, and Hispanic students 28,601, Caucasian students 3,906, and Asian students 775. Native American was 200. And then when we look at Victory, our Black students was 4,053, our Caucasian students 1,538, Hispanic students 12,767, our Asian students 358, and our Native American Alaskan kids 480. In SB 178, it was 10,937. Remember, when I give you this SB 178, there were actually more students served. So I'm just giving you a number based on them doing a division. It was more mathematic formula and getting these because the allocation was $1,200 per student. So African-American students was 10,937, white students 7,823, Hispanic 33,604, Asian 1,712, and our American Indian Alaskan 532. And so I just wanted to just reemphasize again, when we're thinking about policy, that we have students who are least proficient in every single neighborhood. When you're looking at poverty and things like that, having come from a family who's economically challenged growing up, you know, there was a time when we were on Section 8 and we weren't told we have to live in a certain neighborhood. You pick where you want to live. And if someone's willing to rent you that place, then you can live there. And your subsidy goes to that landlord to help you with your rent. And so we have children in poverty or economically challenged or even getting free and reduced lunch who live throughout this valley, not in any one neighborhood. And based on the data, we can see that students who are least proficient do not live all in one particular neighborhood. So I just wanted to reemphasize that again. And it's our obligation to serve all kids as best that we can. Now I'm going to move on to our diplomas. I am sorry, hold on a minute. I just lost my place here. Okay. We're going to talk about the disproportionate number of Black students now enrolled, receiving a CCR diploma. CCR, for those who may not be aware, is the newest diploma that was passed just a couple years ago. And CCR stands for College and Career Readiness Diploma. It's and with the CCR diploma there's certain requirements that you have to meet in order to receive a CCR diploma. It means that you may have to take some AP courses or an IB course, a dual credit course, some CTE courses, a world language course, different kinds of requirements that you're required in order to achieve that CCR. One of the concerns we had when there was discussions about CCR is if we're going to offer another diploma, then we have to make sure that it's available to all students. We can't issue diplomas and give students a leg up or an advantage over other students because they do the hard work of earning that diploma, unless all kids have the opportunity to earn that diploma. And so what we're seeing is that's just not the case. We're not able to, a lot of our students are not able to access that CCR because of limitations at their school that they attend. And you heard me talk about AP and other courses, but that's also career and technical as well. And so we have a huge gap as it relates to our CCR diploma. The numbers for the class of 2019 by ethnicity for CCR diplomas, College of Readiness diploma, was 224 Black students in 2019 received a CCR diploma. When we look at our Caucasian students, we have 1467. Our Hispanic students, 1499. Our Asian American students was 632. And then there's the multi-race 304. I'll give you that. The others were very small. Pacific Islander, for example, was 59, and our Native American Alaskan was 10. But when we look at the gap, we have a huge gap for our African American students. And when we actually look at the throughout the state, it doesn't get much better. In Clark County, I just gave you that number for our Black students. When we look at Washoe County, it was 15 Black students received a CCR. In Carson City, there were 0. At the state public charter schools, we actually had 14. Elko, we had 0. White Pine 1. Lander 1. Churchill 1. Churchill 0. Nye County 1. And Humboldt 0. So as you can see, this is not an issue just with CCSD. It's a statewide problem with our kids being able to access that. And I just want to give you just a snapshot of other diplomas real quick, and then I want to get back into the CTE and our magnet. But with our graduation statistics by other advanced diplomas, our Black students for an advanced diploma, we had 156 Black students graduate with an advanced diploma. And then the advanced honors diploma, which is even harder to get, those are the ones that wear the white robes. There was 122 students, Black students that received that. And then I gave you for the college and career. And then for our standard diplomas, we had 2,035 students receive a standard, Black students receive a standard in 2019. So as you can see, a very large percentage of Black students actually just receive a standard. And it's very disappointing for us as advocates and mentors in the community, because we have so many of our kids show up for graduation and they're wondering what those white robes are and what's that advanced diploma, honors diploma, or what is an advanced diploma, because they don't know. No one's talked to them about in their freshman year, what kind of a diploma do you want to earn? And we all know that that advanced honors diploma makes a huge difference when you're applying to enter a college, whether you get accepted or even if you get a scholarship. So we need to do a lot better when it comes to the journey and the education experience that Black students have when they enter this school system. NDE refers to Black students accessing high-skilled, high-demand CTE programs as chronically underrepresented. That means that they're not attending attending those courses that are high-skilled, high-demand. We'll see them taking things like training, education, those kinds of things, but not those high-skilled, high demands that we're all pushing. A lot of that is a lack of opportunities to attend a magnet or a career and tech academy where robust CTE programs are available. It makes attaining a CCR diploma difficult for many students and in some cases impossible. Statistics show that a higher percentage of students graduating from one of these schools earn a higher learning diploma, meaning they're walking out with an advanced or an advanced honored or a CCR diploma. And one of the things we've been pushing with the CCR diploma is that the colleges in the state of Nevada and the employers consider a CCR diploma when they're hiring a graduate out of high school or admitting them to college. They know that if they got a CCR diploma, they're ready to go. They're ready to go in college, or they're able to do an entry-level position with that employer. So if we're going to give kids an advantage by having one of these advanced diplomas, then we certainly need to make sure it's available to all kids. The selection process to attend a magnet school or career tech academy makes accessing one of these schools more difficult for Black students. And although there have been some recent changes to CCSD in their preferences and criteria, as CCSD's statistics define that more must be done. In fact, in recent numbers, because this change has only been 2 years, and so we've only really been able to see 1 year of data, and so we're anxious to see what the next year will be, or this current year will be. But we didn't see the benefit as we thought. We actually thought we would see the gap actually narrow, but we really didn't see much improvement. And so I don't want to give the impression that CCSD or Dr. Jara and his team aren't willing to discuss this or make additional changes to improve this. But we've been working on this for 14 years. 14 years we've been working with CCSD, our organization, and just trying to improve and access to Magnet. At that time, they didn't even have CTA programs. So the Black student group is underrepresented in middle school and high school. In elementary, we don't see it so much. It's not so bad, but by middle school, we're starting to see a real slide. And by the time we get to high school, it's a real problem. So in the 2021 CCSD school year, Black students are enrolled in high school at 9%. When we say high school, I'm talking about a magnet or a CTA. 9% Hispanic students, 46% enrollment, Caucasian 24%, Asian 13%, American Indian Alaska Native 0.3%, multiracial 6%, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander 1%. And Black students is the only racial group of students or group student group by race that is underrepresented. All others are represented at or above their student population. The other thing that we learned is that there was a lot of talk around we need more Black students to apply. So we did a lot of work around recruiting Black students. So we started changing the conversation and asking different questions. So we start asking the question of, well, who's applying? And how many of those that are applying are getting accepted? We actually learned that, again, the Black student subgroup was the only group students by race that was underselected. So at every other race, they were either selected based on the number that applied, were either placed in a magnet or a CTA at or higher than, whereas Black students was, again, underselected. So it gives us pause around the process for selecting magnet and career tech schools. Some states and some school districts use a weighted lottery to reduce the opportunity gap for Black students. A more equitable system can be achieved by utilizing a weighted lottery in Nevada to reduce the opportunity gap currently disenfranchising African American students. I already talked about the number of years we've been working on this. It's obvious that the only other resolution is to require an intervention, and we would like a legislative intervention to ensure that all student groups have the same advantage and equitable opportunity to access magnet and CTAs. If a choice school has a subgroup underrepresented, the lottery would provide a proficiency. I'm missing a page. Well, the lottery would provide an additional weight to students who belong to a student group who is underrepresented at that school until such time that that school is no longer underrepresented. With our opportunity and access gap with high school students, I've already kind of talked about that. But with our career tech, there's an organization, I don't know if you're all familiar with it or not, called National Alliance for Partnership and Equity. And one of the things they say in establishing whether or not you can identify that there's subgroups that show a gap from their comparison groups, they say that when you're looking at participation rates, the standard civil rights monitoring gap, that is a red flag for potential access discrimination, is a 10% participation gap. And I wanted to just share that with you because I think that's something we need to adopt as going forward when we talk about equity and deciding what is a gap. So we know that based on this, that we need to think about civil rights violations if the gap is 10% or more. And I won't go into all these numbers. I'm hoping that Superintendent Ebert would talk a little bit more about CTE because my time is run out.
Right.
And so I want to, hopefully she'll answer some of that. But some of the gaps that we have identified is quite large, as high as 40%. So if 10% is a standard, but we're at 40, I mean, that kind of draws a picture for you. And when it comes to zone variances as well, that's another area, and I'm not going to get into a big discussion around the data, but I just wanted to kind of share that with you around the zone variances. That's something that the district is looking at as well, and I don't know if Dr. Jar is going to talk about that at all or not when we talk about our choice schools and who has access to those other choice schools that have great programs other than CTA and Magnet. But we also want a zone variance for our students. If we have students who are in schools that can't serve their needs and can't provide them access with the CCR diploma, whatever, we want a zone variance for them. And certainly if a Black student is experiencing racial discrimination or harassment on their campus, they certainly should get a zone variance. And that should be part of CCSD policy. And it should be a standard within the state of Nevada, in our opinion. This past legislative session, ELL students were granted a zone variance if they weren't able to get the programming that they need at their school. We certainly feel that students in the historical West Side, for example, with our Prime 6 schools, have a long history of racial discrimination and have never had granted a zone variance. So we're just asking for fairness around, accessing these kinds of opportunities. When we look at proficiency gap disparities, we kind of went over all of that in pretty much a nutshell. But I'm going to let, or I don't want to say let, but hopefully Superintendent Ebert would talk about proficiency gaps in a more broad frame to frame that all for you. And when we talk about distance learning, I'm sure Dr. Jar is going to talk about distance learning a little bit. But again, when we look at our groups of students who have the widest gap to access distance learning, it is our Black student population once again. We're also hoping that when it relates to racial discrimination, harassment, and systemic racism and bias in the education system in Nevada, that Governor Sisolak and his legislators will keep their promise and really address dismantling that system and start to build up a system that is equitable and equal for all students. And I will close with the discipline because that's always a big issue. And we've been working on that for some time, the entire community. And my hat's off and thank you to all of those in this work and all this work that I talked about today, because we're not doing this in a silo. Trust me, all of you, many of you on this call have been great allies, great partners, and doing your own thing as well to help move us down the field. So thank you for that. But when we look at our discipline, we still have a gap. And although we have reduced behavior issues, and we have seen improvement in the juvenile justice system, the gap is still there. So if are we trying to reduce the behavior or are we trying to reduce the gap? What's our focus? So I think we need to refocus and rethink. If we're trying to reduce the gap, we're not getting there. So why not? So I think that's something we all as a community need to be asking. How do we reduce the gap? It's great everybody's behaving better or we're helping more students or whatever, but it appears as though it's the Black kids that still aren't getting those supports. So I leave you with that. I know that you may have some questions, and so I know I'm running a few minutes behind, so I'm going to take direction from Shawina or Greta. Should I take questions now, or should we wait until after Superintendent Ebert and Jara speak, and then we just take questions all at the end? I don't know.
Chair Williams, I suggest, I hope Ms. Timms is in agreement, we probably should allow State Superintendent and Superintendent of Schools, because I think most of the questions might be answered once we hear data points from those two superintendents. Ms. Timms, are you in agreement?
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Ms. Williams, just to gauge our time, it is now 11:25.
Okay, 11:25. Okay, so now I'm going to turn this over to, it's 11:25? Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Betty Hasbert, who is a member of our caucus, but she serves on the English Mastery Council. She's going to take 5 quick minutes to share with you the work that's going on with the English Mastery Council. It's important to this conversation around literacy. So I'm going to ask her to please now come on, and then Superintendent Ebert will join us, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. I hope you can hear me all. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad to have you here with us. I'm going to take just a few minutes. We wanted to just let you know that we are interested in moving the dial on illiteracy. And one of the ways that we want to do that is to make sure that our children are equipped with knowing how to maneuver in the language they are expected to be able to engage in when they're learning. So what we did is we reached out to the council, to the English Mastery Council, and the council is a statewide council actually, and it's comprised of a nice array of stakeholders. We have our parents, our communities, and our educators. And the job that they have is to improve the quality of education for English language learners in Nevada. So we reached out to them and proposed that they would broaden their tent and include African American learners and Native Americans and others. There was a little pushback at the beginning, but they came on board, and we have been working swimmingly since then. And I was appointed actually by Superintendent Ebert to serve as for 2 years on this task, on this council. And I am serving, of course, on the English Proficiency Subcommittee, and that'll be for 2 years. So our job is to take a look at those learners, those African American learners whose language does not match the language of the schools or the academic language. And if it doesn't, we've got to teach them the language. That's just number one. So we're trying to make sure that we figure out where these blocks might be to improving literacy. So we went about doing our work. And one of the things that we had to do that I really want to leave with you is to make sure that everyone is aware that that language that our students are speaking, if they're speaking non-standard English, it is a language. It is a language. It has been proven since the 60s. So what we want to do is make sure that we move from the point, we don't want to haggle, we don't want to be doing whatever. We just want to just move from that point. It's a language. And even the Linguistic Society of America, which is our premier language center for research, has approved it as a language. So what we wanted to do is take a look at what is existing in the district or in the state already that we might be able to use to leverage this situation. And so we've been going through several different things, looking at the Assistant Superintendent Ruiz came and spoke with us. We looked at, right now they're meeting today, as a matter of fact, and we would be back at looking at how important it is to teach the language of the content areas. And so what we can see from that very clearly, that you're gaining some results as a matter of doing that. So just imagine what kind of results we could gain if we make sure that all of the learners have command of the English language, which is the language that all of the content area is taught in. So now what we want to do is take a look. We're looking at all of these things that may exist that we might leverage. And then we want to go outside of the state and look at some of the programs that exist that are working for these learners. Los Angeles and Oakland have been doing this for decades. And I know you remember the situation with Ebonics in Oakland, where people just went rogue because they didn't understand what was going on. And actually, Oakland at that time was responding to the research. They were trying to develop a program to teach those learners, which were loads of them, English so that they could succeed in our schools. So we want to look at some of those programs, and we noticed that a lot of the states or cities that have established these programs have used Oakland and Los Angeles as their starting points. So I'm hoping that that's where we will go next, and really create and craft the best kind of intervention for our learners here in Nevada. Because you know, as well as everybody knows, if you cannot read, you cannot succeed in this state, in this country. What am I talking about? State, in this country. And we remain in poverty, we remain ignorant, and we remain oppressed and filling up the jails. So we've got to do something about that. And so we just wanted you to know that we're moving that dial. We're going to move that dial on literacy. Thank you so much. I know I kind of rushed through it, but I just wanted to give you a quick little view of what we're doing. And thank you to Superintendent Ebert for doing the appointment. Thank you, Yvette. Done.
And Dr. Betty and Chair Williams, we did put links in the chat so individuals could read more about the research that you were referencing.
Thank you so much. I love my team. You guys are fabulous. Okay, now we're going to move to Superintendent Ebert. I'm very excited to hear her comments today and the direction that she's taking us, and some of the things that they are already doing to address some of the issues that we talked about in the presentation. So Superintendent Ebert, are you with us? Are you ready to go?
I am. Thank you, Yvette, so much for hosting this event and setting the stage. I mean, what a wonderful way. And Betty, it's so great to see you, and I'm glad you're on the commission. So members of the Black Caucus, we've many elected officials, community leaders, educators, stakeholders, everyone on the screen. This is a critical conversation that we're having today. I don't need to tell you that, but I just did. But I am so glad that you're all here. And I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about where we are as a department and where we're heading. I have some amazing board members here who are extremely not only supportive of the work, but they help push the work, right? They drive the department and have equitable access future in mind for all of us each and every day. So as Yvette had shared earlier with the Legislative Committee on Education, again, a great way to set today's stage, in 2017, the state itself, had the motto of the fastest improving state in the nation. And so that gave us a great ambitious goal. And when I returned home to Nevada, I felt that there was something we could add to that. And because being fastest improving in the nation is something that makes sense for a state agency to aspire to. However, it doesn't say anything about our commitment to each and every child. And it doesn't address the fact that even if we were to continue to improve quickly, we would likely be leaving someone behind. So equity is about supporting all learners towards improvement. It's about meeting students where they are, giving them the supports they need to grow. And to ensure this, NDE's vision of equity was reflected in all of the work that we've done, working with our educators, working with our families. The department leadership team made a determination to do a statewide listening tour from September of last year, so actually a year ago, through January of this year. We visited classrooms in every single county across our state. We spoke with educators, administrators, school staff, some of you on the screen, families, community leaders, elected officials, and most importantly, our students. The student voice matters. And when we asked them what they were proudest of and where they saw room for growth, we also saw many students express how schooling right now, they don't feel it's meeting their needs and meeting them where they're at. And so when you hear those voices, we as the adults in the room need to take action. Quite often, I think many of you hear me say, if you could have what you want, what would you have? And so their responses laid the foundation for our 2020 statewide plan for improvement, or our STEP. The foundation lays out our goals and our values, and our goals are ambitious visions for where we want our education system to go within the next 5 years. So by 2025, We heard a clear message from district and school leaders that they wanted the department to set high standards that will propel our students and the whole entire system forward. And so when we say all students in our goals, again, all means all, not just some or not just part of the system moving forward at a faster rate than the others. So as we concluded our listening tour and began drafting the 2020 STIP, there is no way that we could have imagined that our students and our educators and our families, our whole community would be experiencing the shift that we've had in teaching and learning. And we continue to maintain those goals, but because we're basing them in a set of 6 values, it has helped us be agile moving forward. And so those 6 values are equity, number 1, first and foremost. Access to quality, not just that a student has access to coursework, an AP course or a CTE course, but it's a course of quality that we would want our child to be in that classroom with the children, that we have success, that we're inclusive, that we include community, and that we're transparent. Whether we like the data or not, everyone has access to it. And my partner here on the screen, Ms. Williams, asked us for our data and we're open to it. And I loved how, going through how she analyzes and frames all of that work. So transparency is one of our core values. So with our goals as our North Star and our values at the heart of everything we do, we continue to support our districts and our schools in engaging families and communities and meeting these academic needs, and especially in today's environment, social, emotional needs of all of our Nevada learners and all of our families. We defined equity to mean that the learning needs of every student are supported in an environment where all students are valued, respected, they see themselves in the curriculum and the instructional materials while they experience academic success without regard to differences in age, gender, socioeconomic status, religion, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, ability, native language, national origin, or citizenship status. And our STIP is also focused on the opportunity gaps rather than achievement gaps. Because if our children don't have opportunities, there's no way that that gap is going to close. And when we look at those gaps, as were just presented to you, and all the other factors that contribute to or perpetuate lower educational aspirations, students not having an understanding of the opportunities that they have in the diplomas, their achievement and their attainment for certain students is just not going to happen under all of our watches, right? So some of this is about language, and language matters. And our children and their families are listening, and we need to be inclusive in everything we say and do. And especially during the circumstances that we face today, we need to shift away from the mindset that students are behind in their learning and instead we need to plan to meet them where they're at and support them to success. And so simply put, being the fastest improving state in the nation isn't enough. Improvement must include improvement across the board, so all of our students are charting their path toward a better future. And we know that COVID-19 has brought us challenges, but it's also creating opportunities to reimagine education. And so this unique moment is a way to get there. And how we structure, and we need to be strategic and intentional to make sure that no child gets left behind. I know we're running late, so I'm going to skip. Yvette was very good and concise with all of the data, and we have those charts. I would flag a bright spot in that we know that when students participate, so we have 45% of our Black students across the entire state do participate in CTE programs. I'm not talking about magnets, I'm talking about CTE programs across the board. So participation, and of those students, the graduation rate is 89.8%. For those Black students that don't participate in a CTE class, it is 65%. Huge gap, access, curriculum, goals, all of those components. Our 3.8 data, I'll send a link and you can see those gaps there. So we have some good news, but we definitely have a lot of work to do. And we need to build on the progress and aggressively close the opportunity gaps. And so how do we do this? I was thinking about the data and this presentation. And less than 2 weeks ago, we commemorated 9/11. And on that tragic day in 2001, the FBI was leading the investigation. And the day after 9/11, the FBI was forever changed from an agency that investigates crimes after they've occurred to an agency that focused on predicting and preventing crimes before they occur. So a similar shift is needed in public education. We can't continue to do autopsy reports. We need to get on the front end in predicting and preventing our students not having successful experience in our schools. And so at the Nevada Department of Education, our intent is pure. Equip young people to navigate and succeed in an uncertain world. And our aim is clear. Every child graduates with the tools they need to build a home, a life, and a future. So this is easy to say, but it's extremely hard to do. No matter what our intent, we're not judged just by our purpose. We must be judged by the effects of our actions. Despite our best intentions and the efforts of talented and well-meaning people, there's a mismatch between what we aim to do and the results of our actions. The day after 9/11, the FBI realized that the world shifted under their feet. Things had changed so much that they had to pivot in their approach to work. There's no doubt today the world is continuing to shift under our feet.